there, how's it going? Kyle from Collect All Monsters here with my good friend and co-host, Leslie P. Chambers. What's up, Leslie?
What's going on, fearless leader? What's going on, everybody out there watching us right now? We hope y'all will enjoy this little side segment on Collect All Monsters here, where we're doing basically an X Plus gigantic series Heisei figure standoff. Yes, yes, yes. In honor of the big guy's birthday in a couple of days, of course, Godzilla, the King of the Monsters, turned 66 on November 3rd, 2020. So I want to get together with Kyle, my fearless leader, and just have a little friendly competition between these two chunky gigantics, courtesy of X Plus. Yes, yes, yes.
Now I gotta ask you, Leslie. You're holding you're sitting next to the 1989 version of the gigantic that came out from X Plus. Is that your all-time favorite gigantic series?
Honestly, no. He is number two. Of course, my favorite is the 64 for obvious reasons. For obvious reasons, even though I know that figure does have a mixed bag of reviews or people, not everybody has responded favorably to that figure per se, but I'm a ride or die 64 fan. So even though it does have its shortcomings, I still love it to death. And that's why he's in my number one spot. Now, I have to say, if I didn't have the 64 or the 64 was never made, the 89 would definitely be my favorite gigantic. No question about it.
Nice. Okay, so because that's a stiff competition for me, because this is, of the gigantics that I own, this is the one that is my favorite, which we've already talked about. I only own one gigantic, but there are really only two that I find to be like mouth-wateringly like amazing. Actually, that's not true, because I do feel like every single time X Plus releases every time they release a gigantic series figure, it's always amazing on some levels. But for me, I went to X Plus headquarters and interviewed G, and I'll probably put a link to that in the show notes. And I asked him, because the 2001 was such a divergence, that was their first gigantic figure. I was like, this is so different from what you guys do normally, which is movie suit accuracy, right? Like it just walked off the screen. Like, what made you make the change to being this ferocious beast, this 2001 Godzilla that they released? And he said basically that, kaiju should instill like power, and the just seeing them and hearing their names and just the sight of one should make you go, oh, that is awesome, on a scary level almost, right? So I took that to heart. I said, man, that's cool. That's what the gigantic series is going to be. I am stoked for that. So I didn't get that first one, but I got this guy, and I could talk a little bit about that later. But this and those first two especially, those really, really hit home that's what G was saying about kaiju being awesome and being, super powerful and terrifying. And these sculpts to me are what really say we're the gigantic series and we're here to stay.
Absolutely. And I do believe that out of all the lines that X Plus currently does, because, when I first got started with the X Plus, they only had the 25 centimeter line and the 30 centimeter line. Now they have expanded into the Favorite Sculptors line, the Death for Real line, the Yuji Sakai line, and now the gigantic series. And I've always been about that. I've always been about the bigger figures, the bigger size figures. So when I found out that X Plus was going to be doing a line of these figures, I was on board since day one. And once again, like I mentioned, I believe this is the one that gets people the most excited. It seems like whenever we get a new gigantic series announcement, no matter what it is, it could be Godzilla, it could be Mechagodzilla, it could be something else entirely. But whenever somebody says new gigantic series announcement, it seems like everybody stops what they're doing to find out what's going on, because it commands your attention, just like the figures do, which I think is very, very poetic.
They command your dollars too. That's another reason they command so much attention, is because people want to know, how much is this going to cost me, right? Like, these are not cheap figures by any stretch of the imagination.
No, they're not. And as it stands right now in this household, we have a total of, let's see, I got 12. Sandra has, 1, 2, three, four. So we have a total of six.
Lord.
We have a total of 16 gigantics in this household, and I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world. Now, there are some I love more than other ones, but every single one of them, because like you said, they command a lot of dollars, and I spent my hard-earned money to get them.
Yes.
I do care for them. I care for every single one of them. So they're awesome, every single one of them. Absolutely.
They're like your special babies.
Yes, and it seems like when I come into my room, like they're the ones that I really gravitate to the most. In the sea where you have charcoal gray of Godzilla, the gold of King Ghidorah, the multicolor of Jet Jaguar and or Mothra. But when you have Mecha Godzilla in one corner, the Shin Godzilla in another corner, the 89 somewhere, and all that good stuff, you can't help but be drawn to them. That's the power and the magic of the Gigantic series. And I'm looking forward to actually putting these two figures together, because they're putting up against each other to find out which one is superior, because they're the only two from the Heisei series, and that was at a point in the Godzilla film series where Godzilla ballooned to bigger sizes. So it made sense to have a couple figures from the Gigantic series from the Heisei period, and I hope they're not done. There's at least one more I want to see, but we'll talk about that later on.
Oh man, well I love we're doing a Heisei face-off here.
Yes.
A haste-off. Anyway, that should never go anywhere further than this episode. A haste-off, but
okay.
Let's go ahead and start with yours, man. Even though your figure is a newer release than the 95.
Absolutely, this figure, the Gigantic Godzilla 1989. Of course, I have the standard edition. The Rick edition came with an alternate jaw, where you can have it either open mouth or closed mouth. And it also came with translucent dorsal plates that kind of lit up in the dark. I opted to go for the standard because, unfortunately, after the Gigantic 64, which also was supposed to come with a closed mouth jaw, a couple of them did, but a majority of them didn't. I did want to take a chance of actually that happening with the 89. Knock on wood, is actually more of a closed mouth with the 89. So, but either way, because actually when you put in the closed mouth with the 89, he kind of comes across like the 91, which is by far my favorite incarnation of Godzilla from the Heisei period. But I'm glad to have the standard nonetheless. He came out May 2019. And that was a month that almost killed me personally as far as my wallet, because I had like 4 pre-orders that I had to pay for all within that same month. I had this guy, the Yuji Sakai 2002 from X Plus, the X Plus 25 centimeter Rick exclusive Monster X, and the 25 centimeter standard edition of the X Plus King Ghidorah 1964. So
wow, dude.
My wallet was like, no, dude, we're not doing this again. But I'm glad to finally have it, because it was a long time coming with this guy, because it first got teased at Summer Wonder Festival in Japan in 2018. And then like almost a year later, it got into my hands. And I couldn't be happier, because this is such an amazing piece. Even though it is the 89, in certain respects, like I mentioned with the whole closed mouth jaw, in certain respects, he kind of does look like the 91, just a little bit. But
yeah.
more so than that, he is super accurate. He's not stylized like the GMK or a little bit like the Burning Godzilla, whatever. He's a suit accurate Gigantic, and that's what I love most when it comes to the Gigantic series. Nothing against the stylized ones, but I want the actual monster, the beast, the demon himself that was on screen. I want it in vinyl figure form, and X Plus has captured this perfectly to a T. So that's it with the guy I have in my corner. Let's talk about the guy that's in your corner. Yes,
hey,
the guy.
Just before we move on, though, I feel like I need to tell a little story, because every once in a while I go to Japan, and it's been so long now. It feels like it's been so long. It hasn't really,
yes,
but in 2017 I was there, and I was just kind of like, I was there for work. I was bouncing around Tokyo, seeing a bunch of people, and I had originally. I was supposed to have like dinner with G and a bunch of the people from X Plus, and we were going to do an impromptu, like an AMA, like Ask Me Anything, but it was AGA, Ask G Anything. And what ended up happening is my flight got delayed, and I wasn't able to go. I'm going to try and make this story as quick as possible. Basically, we postponed the Q&A. So G had to go back to Osaka, but I was in Tokyo. I went to the X Plus office in Tokyo, and he and I had a conversation. That video is available on the Kaijucast channel. But in classic format, like as you will remember when you were interviewing him at G Fest,
Yes.
we would be in the middle of talking about releases that are coming up, and he'd start telling me about one, and then about like a minute and a half after giving me some details and me getting excited, he'd be like, "Oh yes, please. Actually, please cut that. Don't tell people that that's coming out. We haven't announced that, you know."
Right.
So he did that to me a couple times. The first thing he did in the video was show me the gargantuas, the 25 centimeter gargantuas that were in the jumping pose before they had been announced, and I was like, "Oh, cool! Can we show this?" And he's like, "Oh no, don't show this, please." And he showed me, the 64, the gigantic 64. It had already been announced, but he showed it to me like unpainted. And then he also said in the interview, he told me about this gigantic 89. Another thing, he's like, "Oh, please don't announce yet," you know. So it's always fun to me when I hear about something coming out, and then I get to sort of like forget about it for months and months or years, depending, and then to finally see it released. So I'm glad you finally have an awesome 1989. I struggled with whether or not I was going to buy that one or not.
Actually, I do remember that interview that you did with him, and it was very telling because, you know, the Gigantic series came up as a big topic of discussion during the course of your interview. And when you asked him, because I was on pins and needles just waiting when the topic came up, and when you specifically asked him, "Do you have any more plans to release any other Heisei Gigantics?" And what he said was kind of telling. You know, I'm paraphrasing here, 'cause I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, "Sure, yes." And
I think it's technically, he says, "Please wait." That's like the sign from X Plus that yes, they're going to release something, yes, they're going to announce something, but they can't talk about it yet. Please wait.
Exactly. And one thing I know about G, like he wouldn't have said that if he knew that something wasn't in the works. Everything that he has said that he wanted to make in regards to the Gigantic series has come true. He said he wanted to make a Gigantic 62. That happened. He wanted to make a Gigantic series Ultraman. That happened, a 54, and now an 89. So pretty much everything that G says, you can pretty much take to the bank. It may take a little bit longer than usual to get there, but if he says it, I put my stock in him. So he is awesome. Shout out to him. Hey, G.
Shout out to G. That's right. I will say that in terms of just things that he has said that have come to pass, I mean, he's like batting 100. I think that's a baseball term. But yeah, he basically, because he's the guy in charge of that company, he's able to go in and find people that follow that vision and continue to push those releases and push the quality of those releases. It's good stuff.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about these people, though, because I think that's the bridge between your figure and my figure, right?
Absolutely.
Sculpted by Ryu Oyama of Kaijucast.
Okay.
That's the guy who has made, as Leslie, you just told me, this is the guy who sculpted every single gigantic figure except for the Yuji Sakai figures. And of course, those make sense that they were sculpted by Yuji Sakai, right?
Right.
Yeah. So Leslie's got his 89 there, which I just wanted to say real quick. I thought it was interesting that Kaijucast, who created my figure originally as a kit, they also created a kit of the 89, but it's actually absolutely not the same. This is a 30 centimeter kit, but it's got that same kind of Kaijucast sculpting, the stylization that reminds me of the GMK and the Burning Godzilla. I feel like the one that you have is a little more like realistic to the suit than this guy, right?
Yes.
Now, I'm a huge fan of Burning Godzilla. I think I used to say that, you know, I had a favorite from each series. Back when there were only 3 series, I said Monster Zero, Destoroyah, and GMK, right? And Destoroyah has almost always been the big reason I love it so much has almost always been because of the look of Godzilla. Not to mention there's a lot going on there that I do really love. But the look of Godzilla, he shows up bursts through the ocean in the Bay of Hong Kong, where I used to live, by the way, if you did not know that. I actually lived for 2 years in Hong Kong. And
Cool
so
trivia.
yeah, a little bit of Collect All Monsters Kaijucast trivia. When he popped out of the water there, they just before he did that, they showed scenes of like airplanes coming in into the airport, which of course is like right there in the city, like used to be in the city. And I'm sitting there watching this in like 1996, and I'm like, yes, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So I've got like this automatically, I've got this nostalgic link, this hook into that movie that's never going to let go, right? Because like, oh my God, Godzilla destroys Hong Kong, where I used to live, and he like trashes the Jumbo restaurant where my parents ate when we first went there, and there's just all sorts of cool stuff that I was like really enamored with in that movie. Now, again, I said one of the things about it is his look. Godzilla shows up with these giant patches of red, steaming, smoking skin in the film. He's, suffering from a nuclear meltdown. And the first time I see this, I'm like, yep, sold. Godzilla has a nuclear, he has a reactor for his heart, essentially. And his heart is acting as a reactor and it is having a meltdown. And I absolutely loved the premise of that film, the danger of that film, everything about it I was just totally on board with it. So this look of Godzilla, where he's the burning Godzilla look, has always been like really high up in my favorite Godzillas. If you went through each individual movie's design, I have more of this guy than a lot of others, right?
Okay.
I'm not going to get a bunch of them out, but so when they announced that they were going to be releasing the Kaijucast kit as a gigantic figure, I had already seen that Kaijucast kit. I think it was released back in 2010 at Wonder Festival, and it was one of those like massive kits that I would never expect to be able to like build and paint and purchase even, right? But because X Plus put this out, I was psyched to actually purchase it myself. Additionally, when David and I were there in 2014, it was maybe several months after they made the announcement that this figure was coming out, but we were in Tokyo for the Hail to the King documentary shoot, and we were going through the it was called the Big Godzilla Special Effects Exhibition. And at the very end of it, just before the souvenir shop, there was sort of like here's some merchandise for Godzilla and what's been produced over the years. They had some molds from some figures, I think from Bandai. I can't exactly remember, but they did have the burning Godzilla figure on display as we were leaving that exhibition. And it was definitely one of those, oh man, I am so glad I pre-ordered that kind of moments because it looks so dope in person. And then, later on that year, I think it was at my door.
Yeah, I remember actually David talked about that story. He mentioned that because at first, if I recall correctly, he said that he didn't pre-order it at first because, David has always been very vocal that he's been more of a show collector than the other ones. He does dabble into the Heisei and stuff like that. So that's why he really didn't pre-order that initially. But he said once he saw it in person, he knew he had to have it. And I can definitely understand that because it is an amazing figure. Now, mind you, unlike yourself, Kyle, I have never really been a big fan of the Burning Godzilla in terms of design. Okay. I enjoy the movie. Don't get me wrong. I love Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. But as far as like the look of Godzilla, I was never really a big fan of the design. Now, mind you, I missed out on the gigantic GMK when it first came out. But when they announced the Burning Godzilla as the next one, I said, I'm going after it, And that was actually my first. The Burning Godzilla Gigantic was my first ever Gigantic series figure. And it made me fall in love. Yeah, so it made me fall in love with the line. So even though I may not love too much of the on-screen counterpart, I definitely love the Gigantic Burning Godzilla in vinyl figure form because it is just that. It is amazing on so many levels.
Now, I'm curious as to what you think about the differences in terms of like suit accuracy. Because do you feel like the 89 is way more suit accurate than the 95 is?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, not too long. But there is this argument or like there's this premise that a lot of collectors seem to think that there's nothing suit accurate about the gigantic burning Godzilla. I would like to present a little bit of argument with that. Now, I will admit that it is not 100% suit accurate. There are some things a little bit stylized, in my opinion. Like I think the arms a little bit shorter than what they should be. His toes are really, really sharp because if you recall the suit, his toes were more rounded at the tip. But I think everything else, the dorsal plates arrangement, the long tail, the burning patches, the big, clown shoes, or at least the feet, aside from the toes, the chunky thighs and everything, the eyes, whatever. I think everything else is basically suit accurate. But that's my opinion. But you're going to have some folks that will argue that or whatever. But I don't agree with a lot of people who say that, it is not suit accurate under any circumstances. I think it is to a certain extent. It just depends on how you look at it. How do you feel about that?
No, I can totally get behind that, man. Like I feel like it's not suit accurate like it walked off the screen like the 25 centimeter series is, right? But to me, this is the kind of stylization that I approve of, because the stylization is more about his stance. His arms are tucked back in, which if you ever watch Kenpachiro Satsuma, the guy who played Godzilla from that time period, that's how he does it. He tucks his arms in, puts his hands out like that, just like Godzilla's doing here, right? So that's it's very Satsuma. And then the fact that he's just pushing forward with his chest, his legs are spread out, he's planted his feet down, and he's just like raging in the face. That to me is very Godzilla in and of itself, and very, as I said, indicative of the way that Satsuma played this beast. So I think that in some ways it is movie accurate, maybe not suit accurate, but movie accurate, because he's got that sort of rage to him.
Absolutely, and I will say that even though once again I'm not a big fan of the suit, I will say that is probably, in my opinion, Satsuma's greatest performance in a Godzilla suit. He was Hedra and he was Geiger in the Showa period, and he was Godzilla throughout the Heisei period. And even though I love the '89 and I love Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, I have to admit I think Destoroyah was his finest performance, and ironically, it was his last. So how appropriate is that? Quite
appropriate. So what are some of your favorite aspects of your figure, the '89 that you have there?
It's too many to really say all in one setting. I love everything. Like, I don't see anything wrong with this figure. I don't see any artistic liberties that S Plus has taken. I don't see anything out of place. To me, this is like a suit accurate, perfect. Yes, and I'm going to say perfect representation of the '89 suit, of the BIO-GOJI. I love everything. The color on his teeth, his gums, his eyes, whatever. And once again, I do like in certain respects, he kind of does look like the '91. Because I love that suit, even though it is the '89, just modified. But everything looks great. The one thing I would say I'm not a big fan of, if you want to, because right now I guess I'm nitpicking. I guess I would have liked to have the alternate closed mouth jaw, that way I can close his mouth. But I don't really care for the Rick dorsal plates. So in a perfect world, I would keep the standard dorsal plates, but yet have the alternate jaw option. But aside from that, once again, that's nitpicking. I don't really have any issues with this figure. What about you? What do you love most about your gigantic burning Godzilla, and what do you like the least?
Let me segue off your nitpicking, and I'll nitpick with this, because in the reality of this situation, I feel like this is kind of a perfect figure, right? It's let me get to this one part first. I really do feel like if I was going to nitpick, I'd be like, why doesn't it light up? For of all the figures that they've made that light up, what was stopping this? Now, I've seen the LED rigs that have been built to light these figures up, and I know the answer now. Oh my gosh, it's not an easy task. A, not easy to make it happen. B, that's a lot of lights that you have to use. So I give X Plus a huge pass on that, right? Plus, it's still gorgeous. It's an absolutely stunning figure, in my opinion. The colors are great. Everything is just fantastic about it. Also, what I like is that as the spines come down, actually, let me bring this up closer. As the spines come down and go up the tail, many times you see these figures, it goes orange, 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 white, 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 right? There's a nice even gradation here. That's what I like about this one too.
That's cool. And also, this is not the first, at least the only gigantic burning Godzilla that S Plus has ever done. They've done
Right.
a San Diego Comic Con one where the tail is permanently attached, but the orange patches are brighter than usual on the
Mm-hmm.
original. They've done
There's
a
one where it's
gigantic,
like got white frosty stuff, like when they
the
tried to freeze
frozen one.
them. Yep.
Yeah, the frozen one, and they have done. They put out a kit where if you were a modeler or a kit builder, you can actually
Mm-hmm.
build a paint the kit yourself. But I think out of all of them, the original is the best one. That's just my opinion. But I think out of all of them, the original is the best version of the gigantic burning Godzilla that S Plus has ever done, hands down.
Well, quick question for you. Just so you just mentioned all these reissues of this guy, and we know that the GMK has had many reissues as well,
Yes,
like at least two or three, right?
at
So
least two. Yeah.
what happened there? Why aren't we seeing the crazy reissues of the further figures? Because I tell you what, those figures are the ones that have come out more recently, or seem to be the ones that have been commanding crazy prices on the aftermarket, especially long after they've sort of sold out of the regular stock and they're not no longer found at their retailers anymore.
I don't know. I think because producing these figures, it's a huge gamble,
Mm,
and they don't want to have a whole bunch of people pre-order it, and then maybe half of them actually go through with the payment process at the end. Because, like we mentioned before, these things are not cheap, and I think a lot of people don't really take that into consideration. They see a big giant Godzilla figure that looks beautiful like this and like yours,
mm,
and they don't really take into account of the price, and then you tack on shipping on that. So they like hit the pre-order button and then worry about how they're going to pay for it later. But then
yeah.
once they get that payment invoice in their email, they're like, "Whoa, no, can't do it." So I think that's a lot has to do with it. And plus, they're I think S Plus also focus on figures, or at least designs that are popular at the time. Like Shin has been popular for the past 2 years. Right now, the MonsterVerse Godzilla is highly popular. So I
Yeah.
think they want to strike while the iron's hot on popular Godzilla designs. Then maybe
Sure, sure.
eventually,
But if that's the case, they should then reissue their gigantic Shin Godzilla, right? Because that's another classic case of way more demand than there is supply.
but also at the same time, they have done that a few times before. Like they reissued that, it came out first in 2017, the gigantic Shin. Then
Hmm.
I think it came out like a year later, where it had like the standard red gigantic Shin colors, but gave it like the open mouth that came with the Rick. And
Oh, okay, gotcha.
yeah, and also the Godzilla store came out with that all red kit version that just came out like
Yes,
recently,
yes.
and I think I saw on Facebook that the Godzilla store is going to be reissuing the gigantic purple one, Rick, in honor of
Oh,
Godzilla's
wow.
birthday, in a couple of
See, that's coul. That's what I'm talking about. I didn't realize they had done so many reissues of like the gigantic Shin, of course, seems to command that kind of thing. Have they done that
yeah,
with other of the newer ones like the 62 or the 89 or the 64?
not really. The only ones that come to mind that I know have seen a reissue of sorts has been the gigantic GMK, the Burning Godzilla,
Hmm.
um, Shin, um, of course, the 2019, because they got the Burning one coming real soon. Aside from that, the 62, no. The 54, no. The 64, no. Mechagodzilla just came out. So really just the GMK Burning, Shin, and the 2019 off the top of my head.
Yeah. It's an interesting business, in my opinion, the whole gigantic series, right? The
It
amount of
is.
money that X Plus has to sink into these for production alone. This is one of the subjects that I find fascinating, and probably one of the like 10 people in the entire world that finds the whole behind the scenes of the toy industry fascinating. But someday I would love to hear from G or someone else in X Plus that can tell us some information like like how many of these are produced in 2014 for that first
Right.
initial run. What's those, because that's what really, I don't know, that's one of the things, like I said, fascinates me is like the information about production, how much you have to pay for the thing to get made, how much you sell it for, etc. And of course then on the other side of things, whatever happens on the aftermarket, that's the kind of information that drives shows like this anyway. We're all living
Absolutely.
in the aftermarket. So
Yes.
Especially if you can't get in on those first releases, and especially us here in America not being able to get on some of those first releases, I guess. What's next on the Gigantic series after Mechagodzilla?
Like I said, the gigantic Fire Godzilla or the Fire Godzilla, Burning Godzilla 2019, which is kind of ironic because we are talking about the original Burning Godzilla, gigantic.
Right?
So I
Yeah.
can't now, mind you, I'm not going after it, but I know Mr. Fresh Vinyl himself, he's going to get one. So I'm looking forward to see and he has the original gigantic Burning Godzilla. So I'm looking forward to see how the classic and the new guy on the block come together and see how they pair up against each other as both gigantic Burning Godzillas. Aside from that, I know in your interview, Gigan was teased in the gigantic series, so I hope that he will come sooner rather than later because the response to the Mecha Godzilla that came out earlier this year has been phenomenal. So with him being an awesome figure, I know that will open the door for other non-Godzillas to come into the gigantic series. And why not Gigan? Why not the Gargantuous? Why not Damagen? Or why not a MonsterVerse Kong or something like that? But as far as what may be next is anybody's guess. Only time will tell. But either way, like I mentioned earlier with the announcements, it's going to be a big deal no matter what it is. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, hopefully we'll see more on the winter Kaiju festival that they'll probably not do online.
Right.
I should just offer to help them do a festival in December or January or something. But I think, who knows? I think in February they might actually have a physical Wonder Festival. I don't know how they're going to work that out, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I just want my X Plus releases and announcements, right?
Absolutely. We all do. All
right, man. Where do we stand on this? I mean, I like your figure, but I'm much more of a bigger fan of the sculpting and everything pretty much about this bad boy. He's like I said, he's that power, he's that rage, he's that Burning Godzilla that evokes what Burning Godzilla is all about in Godzilla versus Destoroyah to me.
Well, I'm going to go with this guy. So I think we're at a standstill, Kyle. And that's what the reason why I'm behind the 89 because I love him so much. But once again, it all goes back to the suit. Once again, the Burning Godzilla is not up there with me, but the 89 is. He's in my top 10 favorite of Godzilla design. So that really has a lot to do with it. Take nothing away from the gigantic Burning Godzilla. Because as a matter of fact, he's like the one, whenever I bring new people into my room, he's the one that a lot of people tend to gravitate to because he's not like the rest of them. Even though he does have gray on him, the burning patches is something that a lot of people go to instantly. Like, ooh, what is that? What's the story behind that? So far
he's an eye-catching piece, yes.
Exactly. So as an attention grabber, the Burning Godzilla, surpasses the 89. But for me, because I love the 89 so much, I'm going with this guy. So I think we're at a standstill. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I think I have an idea. There's no shame in dropping out new ideas when we do a video. So here's an idea for the next time we do this kind of thing. It should be live. We should totally do this live, and we should totally do this with an audience. And then at the end of the videos, we should have our live audience help us make the call on which figure wins.
Let's do it. I'm
Dude,
ready
I
for it.
I think it's a winning combination. We could do it like this, where we're just doing a quick half-hour live stream. I think that's the way we got to do these.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and I'm sure people in the comment section are going to post, who they are in favor for or of, I should say. And honestly, there's no wrong answer. If you go for the 89, you're awesome. If you go for the Burning Godzilla, you're awesome. There's no wrong answers here because they both are awesome. There's no other way to describe them, quite frankly.
I completely agree. And actually, you know what? Help us use the comment section for some good, and tell us what you'd like to see X Plus release, hopefully in the future. Make sure to hit the like button on this, and if you have not already subscribed to the Collect All Monsters channel, please do so. And I think that's a great point for us to wrap up this video, Leslie. Hey, thanks for asking me to do this, dude.
No problem at all. And when this drops, it's going to be on Godzilla's birthday. And we want just just to let our voices be heard so we can celebrate the King's 66th birthday or anniversary, I should say. And as I mentioned to Kyle off air, 66 never looks so good, whether you're the 89 or the 95 or the 54 or the 64. All hail to the King of the Monsters. Happy 66th birthday, Godzilla. Yes, yes, yes.